Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are doing a predictions video for the Republic of Consciousness Prize in the US and Canada for this year. Now, I would have expected the long list to have already come out by now. Last year it came out on the 24th of January, but it is not out yet to my knowledge. So originally this was going to be a predictions video and a reaction video together, but we're going to split it into two, and it's just going to be a predictions video today, and there will be a reaction video once the actual long list comes out. If you're not familiar, the Republic of Consciousness Prize is a prize that celebrates small presses. This originally started in the UK, and last year in 2023 was the first year that the Republic of Consciousness Prize US and Canada edition came to be. So this is its second year, and I'm so happy that this prize came to the US and Canada. I loved following it in the UK, and I still follow it in the UK as well, but it's nice to have some presses closer to home to get to follow and root for and support and also discover. So I'm really excited to get to deep dive into some of these predictions with you all today. And we'll go over a little bit of the eligibility criteria so you know what I was thinking about when I was coming up with my own predictions. And I would love for other people to let me know their predictions down below if they have any books from small presses in the US and Canada this year that they just loved, think are worthy of being recognized. So let's see if we can get some predictions going. And I definitely want to support there being more buzz about this prize as well. For the eligibility criteria, we have 3 criteria that are specifically for the small press, and then we have a number of criteria for the actual submission that they're making. So for the small presses, the criteria is that 1, it has to be in the US or Canada, so located in the US or Canada. 2, it cannot earn more than $750,000 in net revenue in a given calendar year. So for this year, it would be 2023. They can't have earned more than that in net revenue. Now, net revenue is a little bit hard to track because there are some exceptions like literary grants and stuff like that. And for a while, I was trying to look into the financial records of some of the presses I was thinking about picking as potential books for this list, but then I was getting too far into the weeds, and I was like, you know, I need to just stop. I need to just make the predictions with my best guess, and that's okay. So that's the second piece of criteria. And then the third piece of criteria for the small press is that it can't be affiliated with any other business entity. So for example, it can't be a small press that is under a conglomerate of other imprints. So like Counterpoint Press is under Catapult Books. It's also has an imprint of Soft Skull Press. So I don't think that those would be eligible. I took out some potential options that I thought might have come up. Somewhat fuzzy to me. There is one exception that if the small press is affiliated with an independent bookstore, then that is okay. Those are the 3 criteria that they need to meet for the small presses. The other criteria that they need to meet for the actual work that they are submitting is 1, it needs to be at least originally written or translated into English. And it has to be a work of fiction. So it can either be a novel or novella or a short story collection, but no nonfiction is allowed. In addition, poetry is not allowed. So it has to be a work of fiction, and it has to be all done by a single author. So if it is a short story collection, it has to be one single author, not an anthology. And then lastly, it just can't be self-published. And that makes sense. It's a prize to celebrate small presses, not necessarily authors in particular. So the focus on it being small presses, I think, tracks. And that is something that I think is great about prizes like this. 1, just to get some additional recognition for small presses who are often coming out with more experimental works that a traditional publisher wouldn't maybe take the risk on. And like, not only is it good publicity for them to show up on a long list or a short list or even win, it's also really nice for them to get a little bit of extra money, because the money here does go to the small press for the most part, and that can really do a lot for a small press to get, you know, a couple extra $1,000s. So I am very excited to get to help promote this prize a little bit more. And yeah, I hope you find this interesting. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about my mindset going into the picks, and then we'll get into the picks themselves. So I only had, like I said, 1 year to look back on to try and get a sense of the flavor that they were picking for the nominations. And last year there were a decent amount of short story collections. I picked maybe less short story collections this year, so we'll see how that goes. Also, last year the split between translated literature and non-translated literature was 6 translated works to 4 non-translated. I think I have 1 or 2 more than that. I have at least, I think 7 or 8 books that are translated. And that honestly is just because I am more familiar with the translated works. So that's a little bit of a bias there. But yeah, I think I picked 8 maybe translated works, 8 or 9. There might only be 1 non-translated one. No, there's 2 non-translated ones. So I think I picked 8 translated ones. And then also I did a mix of presses that were longlisted last year and presses that were not. So let's talk about the books. I'm not going to do a full synopsis just because I think that will take too long, but I'll try and say a little bit about it and then why I picked it. And then if you want to go check out the synopsis, feel free to do that. All right, so for these 10 picks that I have, and maybe some honorable mentions at the end, we're gonna start with the ones that I feel like are more sure bets. There's not really a sure bet here, but a little bit more of a sure bet because they came up on other prize lists or they're authors who have been pretty critically acclaimed in the past. So I feel a little bit more certain about them. The first one of these is going to be Eastbound by Maylis de Kerangal. This is translated by Jessica Moore from Archipelago Books. And I do believe Archipelago Books had a book on the list last year. This one has just been all over the place in 2023. Also, Maylis de Kerangal is a very well-known author. They wrote The Heart a while ago now that did very well. And yeah, so many people have just adored this book. I have not read it. I plan to pick it up soon. And I think this could be a pretty safe bet. And again, they are a publisher that was on the list last year. So that also gives me a little extra surety that at least they qualify, that press is eligible. And this one I don't know much about, honestly. I know the cover, I think, has like a train on it or something like that. So I think there's a train involved in some way or another. But yeah, it's really, really short. So I think this one could be on the list. Another one that I think could show up is The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, and it's translated by Daniel Levin Becker, published by Transit Books in the US. And this was on the International Booker, was it this last year? I think it was this last year, but I think it was for a different publisher, not quite sure. But Transit Books did it here, and this book I think has just been really loved by the people who champion it. And again, it was on the International Booker, so that maybe assures me that judges might potentially like it. Who knows? It's all hearsay. I was really interested in this book before it even came out, and I went to an event Transit Books was at, and the rep for Transit Books spoiled a part of the book, and I was so internally livid because I really wanted to read this book and they had spoiled it for me. So I've tried to take a break in the hopes that I would forget, but I have not forgotten. So I just need to read it anyway, knowing what I know. But yeah, I was shocked when they spoiled it, and yeah, I want to read it. I still want to read it. People have really loved it. It is a chunkier book. And I think it all takes place in a really short amount of time, centering around a birthday party, and there's something unsettling happening, but you don't know what, but I know what. And yeah, the birthday party I think could be a great option for this. I've heard great things. Next one that I feel maybe a little bit more sure about is On a Woman's Madness. This is by Astrid Roemer, translated by Lucy Scott and published by Two Lines Press. This was on a lot of prize lists this year. Most recently, I think it was on the National Book Award in translation. I think it was in the short list actually, or maybe no, it didn't win. It was on the short list, I think. And again, heard so many good things. It's another one that I have wanted to read, but I've been waiting for it to come out in paperback. So I plan on picking that one up soon. And then probably the last one that has gotten a lot of critical acclaim, so that's why I'm picking it, is Kairos by Jenny Erpenbeck. This is translated by Michael Hofmann and published by New Directions. I questioned whether or not to put this on here because New Directions might be too big of an independent press to be eligible, but I wasn't quite sure, so I put it on here anyway. Again, this is another one that's been on a ton of lists this year, and I haven't read it, but just because it's been on a lot of lists and so many people have loved it, I put it on here. So those are the four that have been on other prize lists throughout the year, and that's a big part of the reason why I'm putting them on here. So now we'll get into the rest of the books that I'm a little less sure about, but would potentially love to see. The first one I have to talk about is more like a wish list item for me, but there's hope that this could actually happen, and that is the Book of Eve. If you have been watching my channel, it was my favorite book of 2023. It got published in 2023, and it is amazing. It's published by Deep Vellum. They are one of the ones where I was trying to look up their financial records, and it appears that they qualify based on what they earned last year, but I can't be certain because they do have multiple imprints, so I wasn't sure how that was gonna work. This is by Carmen Boullosa, and it's translated by Samantha Schnee, and I loved it. What more can I say? It's a retelling of the Book of Genesis from Eve's perspective. It's really experimental, so I think it could be a good prize-worthy book. It's doing so many new fascinating things, and I just love that book. So I would love for it to be there. So here's hoping that the Book of Eve might be on there. Another one is At the Edge of the Woods by Kathryn Bromwich. This is published by $2 Radio, and $2 Radio was on the list last year, I think with New Animal, which I did read, but it was so-so for me. And this one I'm really anticipating reading. I recently hauled it in my last haul video, so I got it in December. I think it could be a great book for me, and I'm hoping a great book from them. The people that read it really seemed to enjoy it last year. And again, $2 Radio was on the list last year, so I know they qualify. I feel like this was $2 Radio's biggest release of 2023, partially because it's one of their only hardcover releases that they did. So yeah, I think At the Edge of the Woods has a chance. And next up we have Nefando by Monica Ojeda. This is translated by Sarah Booker, and it was published by Coffee House Press in 2023. Coffee House Press I don't think was on the list last year, but Jawbone, Monica Ojeda's previous novel, was much acclaimed. So many people loved it. It was on so many prize lists. And that book is so smart. I get why it was on a ton of lists. I think she did an amazing job integrating all of the themes and all of the symbols throughout the book. It was so fascinating, slightly experimental. Like, I feel like everything that a prize is kind of looking for. And so I haven't read Nefando, but it is about AI and video games, I think. It's a horror novel, and that subject matter I think is obviously very relevant, and that's why I'm putting it on here. Even though I haven't read it, I do want to read it. So yeah, it's on here because I think it might be a relevant experimental book by an author that I know can do brilliant things. So that is Nefando. And then we have a short story collection because I didn't have a lot to put on this list, but I know there were so many last year, so I felt like I needed some, and that is Dearborn. This is by Ghassan Zeineddine, and it's published by Tin House Books. And Tin House, I don't believe, was on it last year. Again, this is another one where Tin House is a pretty big independent press, or like small press for small presses. So I wasn't sure if they were going to be eligible, but I put it on here anyway. And this one I have not read, but have again heard great things about. It follows a group of Arab Americans that live in Dearborn, and what their experience is like there, because there is a large population of Arab Americans that live there. And yeah, heard great things. It sounds fantastic, and short story collections did well last year, so I wanted to put a couple on here. Next up, we have The Future by Kathryn Leroux. This is translated by Susan Ouriou. I'm so bad at French. This is translated from the French. When it's vowels put together, I'm lost. And it's published by Biblioasis. I wanted to make sure that there were Canadian publishers as well. Biblioasis is a Canadian small press. And this just seemed like a book that Biblioasis was pushing really hard in 2023. So I figured it might be their submission if they were going to submit. And that is basically the logic. I feel like this was their hardest push of the year. So if they were going to submit something, it would be this. So I put it on here, but it does have an amazing cover, and I am intrigued. So we'll see what happens with that one. Next up, we have 10 Planets by Yuri Herrera. This is translated by Lisa Dillman, and it's published by Greywolf. Now, I put Greywolf on here, forgetting in my mind that I think Greywolf is owned or is an imprint of Grove Press, and so they might not be eligible. So this one put an asterisk next to. I don't know if this is going to be eligible, but this was so loved last year. There was a lot of publicizing for this book. So if Greywolf is eligible, I think this would be the one that they would submit. I don't know if they're going to be eligible, but 10 Planets. That is a list of 10. So now I'll talk you through really quickly my honorable mentions. Similarly to what I just talked about with Greywolf, Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad, I think would be an amazing book to show up on this prize, but it's from Grove Atlantic, and I think they're just too big, so I didn't put it in the official picks. The Nature Book by Tom Comita is published by Coffeehouse Press. That book sounds fascinating. I think it would be a really interesting prize book, especially in light of climate change. Again, I think it would be relevant, but I already put Nefando on there from Coffeehouse Press, and since they can only have one submission, I went with that one. But the Nature Book, I think, could potentially also have a chance. Also, Brother and Sister Enter the Forest by Richard Mirabella. It's by Catapult, but again, Catapult is also with Counterpoint and Soft Skull, so wasn't sure if they would be eligible, but heard great things about that book. It's like a new take on Hansel and Gretel, kind of. Think it's very dark and people have really loved it. And then lastly, similar, Soft Skull Press, I thought about Users by Colin Winnett. Again, a very internet book. I think it's relevant, heard great things, but I'm not sure if that press would be eligible. So those are the ones that I think would make it if the publisher was eligible, but I'm iffy on whether or not they would be. Those are the 10 books, and then the honorable mentions to go along with them. Again, like I said, if you have any predictions of what you think might be on the Republic of Consciousness Prize for the US and Canada this year, please let me know, and I will be happy to look into them, and we'll see what actually ends up on the long list when it gets announced. So I will see you all in the next video. Bye.